In this video, we're going to talk about descriptive research methods. There are three main types you need to know. The case study will cover naturalistic observations, and we'll also talk about the survey. So we'll start with case study. First of all, if you have a case study, this means that you are going to look at one individual or group in depth. So only one. You are going to use a case study if oftentimes if something unique happens. So for example, Gabby Giffords, the congresswoman that was shot in the head a couple of years ago, she could be a case study. It's totally unethical to shoot somebody in the head to see what happens, but if it naturally happens out in the real world, then you're going to study that person to see how it affects them. So neuroscientists, neuropsychologists would look at someone like Gabby Giffords, or Phineas Gage, a railroad worker who had a railroad spike shot up his frontal lobe. Again, can't go around shooting spikes through people's heads, but if it naturally happens, study that person. You'll also see case studies for like studying maybe someone with schizophrenia. You see this in developmental psychology sometimes, studying children. There's a famous case study of a girl named Jeannie who was locked in a basement for the first several years of her life. And so she became a case study when she was found. Yet again, totally unethical to go around locking little kids in basements, but if it is done to a child, when that child is found, you can study them. Now, the problem with case studies is that you have to be careful because the case might be atypical. So, for example, Gabby Giffords. Not everyone who is shot through both hemispheres of their brain is going to survive like she did and thrive the way she has done. Not everyone whose frontal lobe gets damaged like Phineas Gage will be able to hold down a job and survive. You can't, just because one person reacts in a certain way does not mean every single person is going to react in a way. So that's the downside of the case study. For naturalistic observations, these are going to be when you are observing and recording behavior in naturally occurring situations without trying to change or control the situation. So this would be if you wanted to study. I had a friend that wanted to study emotion regulation in kindergartners. So she went to the kindergarten classrooms and watched the kids express emotions. That is going to be a naturalistic observation. You go to them, you observe what they're doing. There can be a downside of this if someone acts differently because they're being watched. There's not much you can do about that. Except try to make yourself less conspicuous. But overall, they tend to be better in getting people to act naturally as compared to like a laboratory observation because they're in their natural environment instead of in a more awkward environment like your lab. So that's the naturalistic observations. And then finally you have surveys. For a survey, this is going to be, as you probably are aware, when you are obtaining the obtaining the self-reported attitudes or behaviors of a group. It's usually by questioning a representative. We'll talk about that. Random sample of the group. So there's a couple other definitions to get into here. One of them is what we call wording effects. So this is how you phrase something and how it can significantly impact the results. So for example, a 2005 Pew Research survey asked people one of two things. Half of them were asked whether they favored making it legal for doctors to give terminally ill patients the means to end their lives. When that's what they were asked, 51% said, yes, I do favor that. It should be legal for doctors to give terminally ill patients the means to end their lives. However, when they phrased it as making it legal for doctors to assist terminally ill patients in committing suicide, then only 44% were in favor of that. So same population, it went from 51% to 44% just by changing it from means to end their lives to committing suicide. The wording of the statement affected the results of the survey. You have to be very careful about that when you do research in surveys. Another thing you have to be careful about is who you sample in your population. So there's a couple definitions here. One, your population. Your population is all those in a group being studied. And the sample is the people who you actually survey. So for example, if I wanted to do a survey of coastal students to see who was interested in taking a psychology class, my population would be all coastal students because that's everyone in the group I'm studying. I'm studying coastal, so all the students would be my population. The sample would be the students who I actually ask on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you want to take a psychology class? The important thing to remember is to have a random sample. So when you have a random sample, it is a sample that fairly represents a population because each member has an equal chance of inclusion. What this means is that it's totally not legit if I only ask the students in my classes how much they want to take a psychology class. That's not going to be a random sample because not every coastal student has a chance of being asked. And it's not going to give me legit results because I hope my students have at least some interest in taking a psychology class. Otherwise, they're not going to pass. Whereas the school as a whole might have a different attitude. So for it to be a legit survey, everyone in your population has to have an equal chance of being asked to participate. There's a lot of methods for doing this, but it's essential that you get a random sample for it to be a good survey. So these are all descriptive research techniques.